Welcome to the very first episode of Chit-chat with Kat, where we dive into deep conversations and laugh until we pee our pants. It's called Balance People. I'm Catherine, and I made this podcast so I had a space where I could talk forever, because I absolutely can, and nobody in my life actually wants to listen to me talk for hours, so I guess I'm gonna do that here. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I think I listen to about 2 every night before I sleep, and I get really excited after a long day to get to lay down in bed in the dark and just listen to my favorite podcast. So I'm really excited to have this space for me. And yeah, I've always loved diving into deep conversations with people because I've always been an open book, and I really love connecting with people on that level. But I also want this to be a funny and positive space because not only do I talk a lot, I also laugh a lot, and it almost always ends up in tears. But I've also just gone through a lot in my life like other people, and I really enjoy hearing about others' life experiences and learning from what they've gone through. This podcast will eventually have guests that are your everyday people, because everyday people also have amazing stories to tell. And I really wanted to start off this podcast with a bunch of embarrassing stories because boy do I got them, but I think I'll save that for later for when I do have a guest on. So I thought I'd share another big part of my life that may help someone else out there feel less alone or go get the help that they feel they need but just don't know where to start. This is the story of how I finally got diagnosed with generalized anxiety and panic disorder after going undiagnosed and experiencing symptoms for over 10 years. It's probably going to be a very long story because it was a very long journey for me to get to the diagnosis, so I hope this isn't too boring. It all started when I was around 11 years old from what I can remember. My grandma, who I was extremely close with, she passed away in front of me, and that triggered a lot of depression and anxiety symptoms that I already had in my childhood, but it was just heightened and it got a lot worse. And also what I learned later in life to be PTSD symptoms. So I was always nervous as a kid, and I was overthinking things way more than a kid should, but I just thought that was normal. After that, I noticed I started getting a lot of weird stomach cramps and pains, and it was just making a lot of sounds. But I knew it wasn't hunger because it happened all the time throughout the day, whether I ate or not. And then in freshman year of high school, I just couldn't take the queasiness and the unsettling symptoms anymore, and I finally decided to tell my parents about it. So they took me to a doctor who had no idea what it could be, and he sent me to a gastroenterologist, which is basically a stomachs and intestines specialist. And this doctor made me feel really stupid for coming for a little stomach upset and sounds, but it's probably also the way I described it because I was young and I was really scared and confused, and I just didn't know how to explain what was going on with me. And she gave me pills for I don't remember what, and she said to come back in a couple months if nothing changed. So I took the pills and nothing changed, and I never went back because as time went on, my parents didn't really mention it again, and I thought I was fine since they thought I was fine, and the doctor just never called, so I never spoke of it again. My 4 years of high school following that were some really difficult times, not because of bullying or anything, but because I had to hide these weird symptoms and emotions that I was feeling and didn't understand for so long. Mental health and physical symptoms of stress and things like that, they weren't as prevalent and spoken about as they are today. So I don't really want to get too much into what I went through in high school because that could totally be another podcast in itself, and I actually never really shared the full story with anyone, not even my therapist. But basically, in those 4 years, I went through a major weight gain from depression, and then that led to an eating disorder, and then that led to me wanting to get control of my life back, so I got to be the most fit and healthiest I've ever been. And yeah, so basically those 4 years were a crazy emotional roller coaster. When I graduated high school, I just felt this immense determination to somehow let the past go and cure myself. So for the 2 years I went to community college after high school, I worked out a lot and I found things to do that made me happy. And I was just really ready to transfer to my childhood dream college at UCSD and start this new exciting chapter of my life. College was really fun for me for the first year. I had a blast. I joined a fraternity and I made some amazing friends that I'm still friends with today. And I really got to find and be myself. But even during those good times, I had those same symptoms of pain and uneasiness in my stomach that reminded me that, I can't really run away from the past because I never really addressed the issue. So then second year rolled around and it kind of just went all downhill. I remember I started to have really bad back and neck pain with my stomach issues now, and so I found myself 2 doctors that were near campus, and I went every couple of weeks to both doctors, hoping that one would give me answers that the other couldn't, but both were just telling me that I was having the typical school stress and that I was fine. And now that I know what an anxiety disorder actually feels like, I remember 2 instances clearly that were anxiety, but I had no idea when I was in college. So I remember there was a time I was in the car with my friends in San Diego and I suddenly felt like I couldn't get a good breath in and I'd have to roll the windows down just to breathe. I don't know why I felt like this really big adrenaline rush that went like straight to my butthole. And I had to deal with it with humor like I usually do. So I was just joking with my friends like, haha, I feel like I'm suffocating. Let me roll down this window. But inside, I was very, very scared because I felt suddenly like I was submerged underwater in like a submarine and there was no way out. And I had to try to break through this window to save myself. So I rolled down the window and then the gushes of wind coming from the freeway kind of brought life back in me. And I didn't even think about it being anxiety or panic attacks because that didn't cross my mind that I could have that. And I just thought, oh, how weird. And then I moved on and rolled the window back up when I could breathe again. And then there was this other time where I visited home at the tutoring center that I used to work at because 2 of my friends were working there that morning. So my friend actually picked me up and I was just chilling with them as they tutored. And then at one point I was helping draw some posters and then I suddenly felt extremely lightheaded and short of breath and I was pretty sure I was going to pass out. And so my friends had to lay me across a bunch of office rolling chairs and I tried so hard not to roll away. Like that was very uncomfortable because I was already freaking out and I'm like, now the room is kind of like spinning and I'm moving. But they laid me on the chairs while they were working with the kids and I had to call my mom to pick me up, but she was convinced that it was hunger, so she actually picked up some food before bringing me to the doctor. And by the time she arrived, I already felt kind of okay again. And when we finally got to the family doctor, I told him about how I've been going to doctors in San Diego for intense neck and back pain and these stomach issues, and he told me that I was probably just stressed and needed to take an Advil. Now I'm going to go on a quick rant about this doctor because he is the only doctor I remember having like basically our whole life. I think after my parents took us to maybe a pediatrician or something, I don't know. But he was our family doctor and he always solved all my problems with just telling me to take an Advil, which was so annoying because it never felt like he was like trying to help. And he doesn't even have a thermometer in his office. And I remember sometimes if you would say that you had a cold or you weren't feeling well, he would be like, well, what was your temperature? And it's like, I don't know, can't you check it for me right now? And he never could because he didn't have these basic things in his office. So after that incident, I told myself that I never want to go back to this doctor again because I've already got to experience what good doctors could be like in San Diego. I ended up in the hospital about 3 times during my 2 years at UCSD, twice because of really intense stomach pain that freaked me out and now I know is actually from anxiety, and once because I couldn't breathe and I felt a lump in my throat that just wouldn't go away, which prevented me from being able to eat. So there was a time where I sat at my doorstep and I was actually having trouble breathing right before I was supposed to leave to grab dinner with a friend. So instead of going to Chipotle for dinner, we went to the hospital. I was put on a random bed in the hallway and after a very short discussion was told that it was acid reflux. I had no idea what this was, and because I'm a big fixer, like if something is wrong with me or making me unhappy, I want to like fix it as soon as possible. So I did a lot of research on acid reflux and realized I had to completely change my diet to kind of get rid of this. And so I changed my diet to bland boiled chicken and broccoli every single day with no salt. Not that you couldn't have salt, but stupid me was like, well, if I'm already eating bland food, why add the salt and extra calories? But yeah, that was dumb. Anyways, I was refusing to like eat or snack on anything other than some pieces of boiled chicken and broccoli because I was so afraid of feeling that suffocating feeling again where I was sitting at the doorstep. So this made me lose a ton of weight, and I think I was at the skinniest I've ever been because I was just so afraid to eat anything. Like, I'm a big snacker, so for me to not want to snack at all because I was that scared just really shows you how paranoid I was. And obviously I could have had like a chip or something, right, and been just fine, but in my mind I was like, if I eat one chip I'm gonna be suffocating again. And now that's what I know is the anxiety disorder talking. So yeah, now also since I know what anxiety disorder feels like, I know that that was just my anxiety telling me that food is my enemy, because that's what anxiety is. It's the irrational fear of things, and I had an irrational fear of food. And so it was really difficult for me in the next few months to kind of retrain myself and my brain to let myself eat normally again. So for the rest of my last year at UCSD, I just kept having these symptoms of shortness of breath, severe stomach aches, overthinking everything because I didn't want to trigger these symptoms again, and so on. And now I know that all of these were just symptoms of an anxiety disorder, but I didn't know it then, so it was just basically like a hot mess. However, when multiple doctors dismiss the severity of your symptoms for years, you kind of just start to tell yourself to let it go. I'm not angry at my doctors, or I think I was more frustrated, but I get it because I know I presented so many different issues that they probably thought was all made up in my head, because anxiety just presents so many damn symptoms. But it sucks that all these years I was just really confused about what was going on with me, and it drove me to a really dark depression in high school and college, which again can be another podcast in itself if people want to hear about that. So then I finally decided to get help in my last summer at UCSD because I was crying almost every day and I didn't know why. Sometimes I knew it was because of the symptoms that I was feeling, and then sometimes I was just really down and I would end up on the floor just like bawling my eyes out, and I had no idea why. I felt so sad but also wanted to be alone on the floor. It's just really scary to be in such a deep depression and in such a dark place. So I found that the Women's Center at UCSD gives free counseling to students, and this was where my life changed, and I met my very first therapist ever, who literally saved me that summer. And I rave about her all the time because I can never find a therapist like her again, and I've had quite a few since I've moved home from San Diego. We just clicked so well with our personalities, and she made me feel so comfortable that I opened up to her immediately, and I loved how we got to talk like, girl, you will not believe what just happened, and have such a good time. But also she listened to all my sad stories and watched me ugly cry a lot. I bet you I was ugly crying a lot. Fast forward to the summer after I graduated college. This story is almost over because we're almost to the diagnosis, I promise, unless I keep rambling. But anyways, I had moved back home and it was my brother's birthday lunch, which we were driving from San Jose to Half Moon Bay for. So I think that was about an hour ride on this really long freeway. And so we were on the freeway by now, and my neck pain and my back pain just was so bad that it hurt for me to sit and breathe. And then suddenly the pain just hit me really bad where I completely felt like my breathing was cut off. And I remember being in the passenger seat, and I turned around to look at my parents and I said, I need to go to a new doctor this week. It's so bad. I really can't take it anymore. I was just so overwhelmed with emotion that I felt like I wanted to cry because nobody was hearing me all these years and I was just at my breaking point. And then it all happened so quickly where I felt my throat closing and I said out loud, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And then tears started coming out and it started to feel like my throat completely closed. And then my head felt extremely heavy and tight. And the scariest part was my entire body went numb and then it hit my stomach and chest. It felt like after all these symptoms happened in just a second, it felt like a brick wall was just dropped on top of my stomach and my chest. And I think that was like the scariest moment because you feel like it's a heart attack. And I genuinely just felt like I was dying. That was my first major panic attack, and I didn't know. And I still feel really horrible for the fear that I probably put my family through in that car while we were in the middle of a super long freeway drive with just like mountains around us. I think like everyone at some point had their hand on me somehow because they all probably thought I was dying too. So like I feel really bad that I put them through that. I remember, well, actually, I don't remember. I like completely blanked out after this, but I'm pretty sure my sister like looked up a hospital on Yelp or something. And I remember being wheelchaired in because I couldn't feel anything. And I was just crying up the ugliest storm. Like, I really wish I could have seen what I looked like that day because I was probably just like crying so much. Anyways, I know in the emergency room, if you have chest pain or symptoms of heart attack or anything, they kind of check you first before other patients waiting. So I was let in pretty soon, and in the room they checked my vitals and they said that things were all normal and my numbers were great. And I was so confused because I was like, what? I just went through all that. What the hell was that? And I'm so embarrassed that I put everyone through that and my vitals are normal. And my body, the feeling started coming back. And I remember just in that moment, I felt really stupid because I just caused all that chaos, but everything was actually normal and I was okay. Anyways, I was brought to the back where a doctor came and talked to me and told me that I just had a panic attack. And she asked if I ever had one before. And I told her no, but I had all these years of symptoms that I experienced. These stomach pains, this back pain, all these things. And she told me that she doesn't think that much is wrong with me physically. And those were just probably symptoms of an anxiety disorder. And I kind of just sat there quiet, really overwhelmed. From everything she just told me, and I was just absolutely drained from everything that just happened. Like, that panic attack took all of my energy to have, y'all. And then she gave me an anxiety pill, which I actually didn't even know was an anxiety pill, but I also didn't know much about how strong anxiety pills could be. And so I took the pill and then we went to lunch. And that pill, y'all, it knocked me out immediately as I got in the car and after lunch. Like, I could just keep sleeping all day. And that was the time I learned how strong these anxiety pills are and why people get addicted. And I remember my brother saying that he thought I was dead and had to check a few times when I was in the car because I just wasn't moving because of this pill. It was so damn strong. And needless to say, I was just really embarrassed at lunch because I'm an Asian American, and typically Asian families, they don't talk about their feelings much, let alone anxiety. This is something that you just have and deal with. So we still had to go to lunch after this happened. I was just like, this is awkward. But I tried to act normal so that I wouldn't freak my parents out. When I got home, I knew I needed help, but I just took some time to sit there and think about everything that just happened and what my next steps were. And so I went online and I researched like I was on the hunt for the freaking golden ticket. I was just so afraid of getting another doctor that just wouldn't take me seriously. So I finally found one within Stanford Healthcare and he had amazing reviews. And so I called the office and they said that he was booked for over a month. But they had several doctors in this office too that were also great. And there was one with an appointment within that week. And she convinced me pretty easily because I'm very trusting of people, even if I've never met them. So I was like, sure, I'm going to take this appointment. As I waited for this appointment, my life kind of turned upside down. So every day after the first panic attack, I had them at least twice a day, just as intense every day. And I couldn't sleep and I was just constantly scared of the next one and that I was dying. and I was mentally and physically exhausted because I kept having them and I didn't know how to handle them. And when your body is constantly thinking it's dying, it's going to get exhausted. I went to my first appointment with this doctor alone and just ready to finally get help. And I was really happy to find out that this doctor and I clicked just as well as me and that first therapist I had at San Diego. And she was so patient and talked to me for almost an hour about everything I just told you guys from childhood to now. All these symptoms were new to me, right? Like these panic attack symptoms, and I wanted to go through all of them with her because they were all hitting me at once and I needed to know what it was. Not that that did much for me because my anxiety just told me I was still dying anyways, but still. That same day that I saw her, she diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and panic attacks and immediately took action to help me adjust and manage a life with this. And honestly, it was really overwhelming, but also very relieving because I finally had an answer after all these years of what these symptoms that were like messing up my life were. And now it's like there's a name to it and I can start getting help for it. And I was just really, really happy, even though I knew that this was going to be a lot of work. So it's now been over 3 years since this happened, and I've gone through so much with my health since then, being also diagnosed with a chronic pain condition called fibromyalgia, and basically having like every test under the sun done. It's been a really crazy 3 years, and that could be another video in itself because I'm going to stop talking before this gets way too long, but I guess I can say I've become like a really big mental health and chronic illness awareness advocate, whatever you want to call it, in the past few years. And I really want to be able to talk about that more on this podcast so that those who are going through the same thing can relate and feel supported and less alone. Because when I can't sleep at night, I like to go read about other people's stories, and it makes me feel better that other people are experiencing the same thing and I'm not dying, even though it also makes me sad that so many people in the world are going through this. So that was basically my journey to getting diagnosed, and I wish that I could say I'm a lot better now, but guess what? I'm not, and it's okay. I'm really hoping to be able to talk about mental illness and chronic illnesses more in the future on this podcast because I think that will be really helpful to raise awareness, and also just, yeah, like I said, to help people, those that can relate, feel less alone. Also, I really want to quickly just mention why I decided to do black screen videos for this podcast on YouTube. I've always enjoyed black screen videos because, I don't know, I like the idea of not judging someone by the way they look, the way they dress, the way they move, whatever else people can judge people on nowadays, and really just focus on the stories they have to tell and the things they have to say. I know this probably makes me sound like I'm some hideous monster hiding behind the screen, but that's not what I mean. I just really want the words to be heard first and no other distractions, if that makes sense. But I also really like black screen videos because it doesn't leave you tempted to sit in front of a screen and stare at it for hours as someone is talking. But instead you can just go do some laundry as it's playing in the background, or lay down and sit down with your eyes closed and relax and just listen to what people have to say. Well, I guess that's the end of this episode, so thanks for listening and peace out, homies.